Hey. Thanks for joining. I like to come in with a little music, a little jamming. All right. We're going to go out with some music. So actually, if you have a song that you'd like to hear, right, for our outro, let me know, right, what you want to hear. How you feeling? Makes me want to holler. Trayvon the Tyre, civil rights attorneys share insight and inspiration for how we forge ahead and fight back. My name is Keisha Brown, and I am the founder and CEO of Justis Connection. I'm going to be your host this morning, this fine afternoon. Here we are on February 16th in the most blackest Black month of the year, February, right? It's Black History Month. So during this noon session, we're going to take a soft dive, okay, if you will. This evening at the 8:30 session, we're going to take a deep dive. But for now, we're going to take a soft dive into civil rights. And I want to talk a little bit about who we are at Justis Connection, hear from you out there. Can I get some love? Can I see who's out there? Where are you at? What state are you in? And I'll have some more questions for you as well as we go on. But I want to be able to set us up for what is going to be the most dynamic conversation this evening, right? Because both J. Wendell Gordon and Dwayne Blackman are amazing attorneys who have fought the hard fight. Because I know sometimes we think that the only attorney out there is one. I'm not going to name no names, but I know many of you are like, this is the only brother out here doing it. He's not. He's doing great work, don't get me wrong, but there are other attorneys who are out here in the trenches representing and showing up and fighting for everyday people, right? And so part of this is about empowering us in that process, knowing more so we can do more and also be sure in what we know and how we present. So I want to share a little bit about who we are, Justis Connection, right? As the premier Black attorney referral network in the country, right? And our mission is to enhance the visibility of Black attorneys, period, by sharing their expertise with the world and leveraging our relationships to bring them new clients, right? Our attorneys in our network, we do some pathway to potential clients, business development support, and so forth. But it's really about how do we support Black people? How do we support those who haven't been who've been disenfranchised and marginalized and who have been on the back end of the legal system? Come on, y'all. Because not everybody feels like they're on the front end of the legal system. 65% of Black adults have felt targeted because of their race. Now you're like, well, who the other 35% who don't feel that way? Right? And then you could say similarly, about 35% of Asian and Latino adults have felt targeted because of their race. So this is not just in our heads, right? This is a shared feeling that we all have, many of us, that we want to make sure that you feel informed, right? That you know that you have a place to go to, especially on issues like civil rights. Civil rights are human rights. There was a debate back in the day around whether you call them human rights or civil rights, right? Because sometimes we think of human rights as food and housing and shelter. Civil rights being something that only happens to Black people, right? Or only happens to people of color. And the reality is that being humans, we have the same endowed rights as everyone else. And so when you look at these stats that talk about 65, the vast majority of Black people feeling targeted because of their race, it's not just about, dang, we all feel this way. It's about how do we push forward and fight back against these systems, right? And that's where the law comes into play. The law isn't always about just jamming us up. The law is also something that we deserve the right, the ability to proactively engage on our own behalf. You hear me? Right? So let me ask you, right? All y'all out there, have you ever felt targeted because of your race, right? As a Black person? I mean, I'll share, of course, right? Whether it's being followed in a store, whether it's being talked to differently, right? Like in a room full of people, or dressed differently, or looked at differently because I'm a Black woman. And so I think, or asked certain questions, right? Whether it's in school. I remember being in high school, it was the worst. And I went to an all white, lily white, y'all, the whitest of white, high schools for my last 3 years. I went to a cool public school my first year. Shout out to all my Glen Academy people who are watching down from Brunswick, Georgia. But I had gone to this private school. And, I felt targeted because of being a Black person all the time. Let it be something about Black people. They looking over like, well, what you got to say, little Black girl, right? And, the type of person I am, I'm going to say something either way. But have you ever felt targeted because of your race? Right? I'm asking that to you. Only you can answer that question. How you get to show up in this world. Have you ever been targeted because of your race? All right, I'm gonna let y'all mull that over. Right? Because the reality is that police killings, I know we hear about it oftentimes in the news. And the reality is that police killings of unarmed Black people, unarmed Black people, even when they're armed and it's unjustifiable, that's not even in this number, right? And so we oftentimes have personally go through these traumatic experiences. I didn't watch the video. I don't have that in me, right? That's not how I intend to overcome or to give back, or we all have our personal experiences in our circle, and we cope with it the best way that we can. But these numbers are real. And so having civil rights attorneys, because I got to bring it back to the law, y'all, right? Having civil rights attorneys in our corner is crucial to being able to navigate, especially as a person of color, especially as a Black person, because we're not going to be able to just do this on our own, hoping that shit don't hit the fan. Because shit is going to hit the fan if it's not already on there and you're trying to live a life smelling of shit. When someone could be that advocate for you, right? And for those who, heaven forbid, fatal police violence, meaning you don't make it out alive. But when you do make it out alive, what then? What then? Right? Big or small. Sometimes it's not about us deciding, oh, this is too small. This ain't nothing. I'm just gonna have to get over it. Let somebody else who knows the law, who knows how the courts have handled these situations, who knows the required evidence, be able to make that determination. Right? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Can we agree on that? Can we agree that we don't know what we don't know? Right? And so having someone who, like a J. Wendell Gordon, warrior lawyer, who's going to be joining us this evening, or Dwayne Blackman, based in DC, having them listen to your situation, right, can give you the information you need on what is the next best choice for you. And so 84% of Black adults say white people are treated better than Black people by the police. Is that news? Is that striking to anybody out there? Anybody out there like, what? Why would Black people think that? Right? And 63% of white people agree based on a 29 research. 63%. Now, they might say that, but what are we doing about it? What are we doing about it? Right? And that is, I think, one of the most frustrating parts of it all. What are we doing about it? What can we do about it? And what do we need to do about it? Because it's a personal choice when it personally happens to you, right? As far as what your next steps are. How do you handle the situation? Not everybody wants to go to court. Not everybody wants to hire an attorney, but it behooves us to have the conversation before we make whatever the ultimate decision is, right? Look at all your choices. You don't rarely just walk into a store with your eyes closed and be like, nah, I need some shoes because I don't got nothing on my feet, but I'm not going to buy nothing. No, you walk into a store, and even, especially if you don't have shoes on your feet, you're like, let me try on some different shoes here. Let me see what feels right. Let me see what looks good. Let me see what enhances my lifestyle moving forward. That's the same thing you want in an attorney. Someone who's going to help you look, feel, and advance your lifestyle moving forward, right? Especially in your most challenging situations. So let me ask you, have you ever thought of yourself as a victim of police misconduct? Now, misconduct runs the gamut, right? Misconduct runs the gamut, whether it's unfairly pulled over, spoken to with harsh or abrasive or abusive language, that including curse words and things of that nature, racial slurs. It's harassment, meaning good and well this same officer just happens to be the same one, right, who comes over and over into your same block, into your same circle, or to you directly. So in my past life, before I built Justis Connection, I was the executive director for the Civil Rights Office of Baltimore City. And in that capacity, I ran the Civilian Review Board, which had sole oversight over the Baltimore City Police Department and like 3-4 other law enforcement agencies in the city. And I started that position about a month or two before the Freddie Gray uprising. And I will tell you, right, that is the definition of shit hitting the fan, right? Because remember, the city was on fire, literally. And when I began that position and I began looking at all of the complaints that the Civilian Review Board received, we know these situations, but it was still nonetheless shocking to read and hear about all the different situations. And these are the people who took the extremely difficult step to find the Civilian Review Board, because at that time we were based out, we were in a temporary location. There was no online portal for you to submit. You had to go to a police station, to the very people you want to complain about, and fill out something in writing and hand it to them and hope they handed it to us. Now, if that ain't insanity, I don't know what is. But that was the process, right? And so I would look at these complaints from folks. And I remember there was this one complaint of a woman who said the officer, she filed a complaint, and then the officer showed up at her house. You hear what I said? And then said, I'm watching you. I know what you did. I know that you filed this against me. That's harassment, right? The definition thereof. And so there are all these types of things, whether it's pushing, touching, unwanted touching. Come on. There are all these things that can happen that equate to police misconduct that we oftentimes don't even consider because we're just grateful to make it out alive, right? And so the way that I believe that we change these systems, one of the ways, because there's many different ways, one of the ways is by engaging and holding folks accountable, right? But also recognizing that we want to be safe, right? And that we want to do what's best for ourselves and our family and so forth. So there's a comment, right? Law enforcement are in denial. Just a comment. Law enforcement are in denial of their treatment towards Black and Brown communities. Until they can admit to their egregious treatment, there remains deep cognitive dissonance. That's from the sacred Ibis. I hope I pronounced that right, Ibis. Thank you for making that comment, right? And so, look, some people don't ever want to admit, right? We have the stats, we have the data, and quite frankly, our lived experiences are legitimate. They are enough, right? They are what is data and evidence thereof. And oftentimes when we cope with it in the darkness, it never comes to light, right? And it is hard to hold people accountable. And I'm not saying hiring a lawyer is the end all be all, but it is a pathway, right, to holding people accountable and, most importantly, making yourself whole in the process. Okay, because this isn't just about doing it for doing its sake. It's about doing it for yourself, right? So let me ask this question, because I've been talking a lot about lawyers and clearly that's my thing. But have you ever hired a lawyer? Do you have a trusted attorney that you can call? Because that's what this is about. Now, this I want to hear in the comments, a yes or no, maybe so, right? Whether you have ever hired an attorney. Have you ever hired an attorney? Because if you have, then you have already taken one step, right, to investing or making a connection with someone that you had decided at that time and point that you needed to trust in a challenge or crisis or with a major decision. And so for a civil rights issue, that could be employment discrimination, right? There are laws against that. It could be around police misconduct. There are laws against that. Right? It could be against discrimination in public accommodations. We often don't talk about that. The fact that, you can't be denied access or treated differently because of your race, color, national origin, other protected classes in places of public accommodations. I'll give you an example, right? Because you're like, what the heck are you talking about, Keisha? I'll give you an example. So one example being, if you wanted to go to a gas station, right, and use the restroom, and it's open for the public to use. But for some reason, the people there were like, no, the bathroom is closed actually, so you can't use it. It's not in service. And then you stand there and you're like, well, let me get some Doritos because if I'm here, I might as well. And then you see, right, that someone else is using the restroom. And you're like, wait a second, I thought it was closed. And then you said, well, the Doritos too high, so I'm not going to buy any. But let me see if somebody else has this situation happen to them, right? And you notice this pattern. And this sounds crazy. You might say, Keisha, nobody doing that in 2023. You're talking about 1965 civil rights era. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. When I was running the civil rights office in Baltimore City, that was one of the complaints that we had received, right? That this was happening, right? And so we oftentimes think about having an attorney as, only when you're at your worst. But there are reasons why people go to law school and are trained to assist you, right? So you can sit here and you can listen to me all day, but I want to make sure that what we are doing fits your needs, that we're meeting you where you are, right? Because your civil rights, they're valuable. They're so valuable that they're written in stone in federal, state, and local statutes. Laws all around the country written to ensure that your civil rights are respected and honored. And so at Justis Connection, we're about that life. We're about saying, we agree. And we are here to support that. So this evening, we're going to take a deep dive. We're going to bring J. Wendell Gordon, the warrior lawyer, right, to the stage. And he's been doing this look, both brothers have been doing this for over a decade, right? Dwayne Blackman, based out of DC, at one of the most preeminent civil rights firms. And so we're going to take a deep dive with them. I want you to come ready to ask whatever. Let me tell you, no question is too small, too silly. Oh, I guess I should know this. No, this is the time. These are civil rights. Let me tell you, you try to get them brothers on the phone right now and they're busy. Okay? But we have secured their time for this evening on your behalf. And so I want you to feel comfortable and confident coming to listen, to learn, and also to engage. Ask your questions, make your points. This is about you having this forum, and it's called Ask Me Anything, right? And so we want to make sure that you have the ability and the comfortability to do that, right? So let me ask you, do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Do you have any thoughts as you think and readily yourself for this evening's session? Because I want to see each and every one of you back then. And I want you to put in the comments, I was here at noon and now I'm here at 8:30. I'm going to ask you, right? I'm going to ask you and I'm going to want to see you there and shout me out, right? Let me know where you're coming from, where you're at, because we also want to make sure that we bring on lawyers in the future who are licensed to practice law in the state, in the jurisdiction. I was going to say jurisdiction, but it's basically the state that you are in, right? So let us know. And if you have an attorney in your life who you're like, do you know about Justis Connection? Tag them too, right? Tag them too. Bring them along because we're growing, right? And we only grow with each and every one of us making this happen, right? So I want to thank our sponsors not our sponsors, because we don't really have sponsors per se, but we have partners in this because what do they say? You want to go someplace, go by yourself. You want to go further, go together. right? And so I'm all about partnerships. So we reached out to the ACLU of Maryland. So thank you for being a partner. Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C., which is the flagship AME of the AME faith under Dr. William H. Lamar. So we thank you for being a good partner in this. We thank Black Men Network for being a partner. We thank Black National Reporters Association, a new association that we're working with, as well as, I'm gonna forget one, y'all. I'm not gonna forget. If I can just read their logos, that would be easier instead of me trying to do it from heart. Oh, and of course, the Washington, D.C. Mayor's Office of African American Affairs under the leadership of Thomas Bowen. Thank you also for being partners in partnership with us for this event. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining and see you again at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same place. We'll make this happen and take a deeper dive. Thanks so much. All right, we're gonna dance out, y'all, because I told y'all we were, and I have it all teed up. Let me see. I have it all teed up, but I'm taking. There we go. I'm gonna take me off so that we can dance this thing out.